Good afternoon and benvenuti. It's a great privilege to welcome Professor Marc-Oliver Pahl. He is chair professor for cybersecurity and critical infrastructures at the Technical University of Munich and at IMT Atlantique, École Nationale Supérieure. And as well, you are a key driver of the German-French consortium for the future of the industry, I think.
Yes.
So that's the core of Europe. Konrad Adenauer, Charles de Gaulle established it here, trust. And the link, the handshake between Germany and France are one of the two, the neighbors and important players with all the other nations for the future of Europe and thus connected in the world. And your keynote is on empowering minds in the digital age.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Achim. And France and Germany, the motor of Europe, sometimes a little bit struggling. You can still read it. I'm working a bit on unstruggling this motor. When I updated the presentation, I had a discussion I had with Stephanie in mind, and the discussion was, for whom do we create sustainability? And in the end, the planet does not really care because the planet will survive us. But sustainability is really something for us humans. And therefore, I just thought, okay, I put it at the beginning because it's a nice cartoon that you find in different flavors. As Achim already said, I'm with IMT Atlantique, which is a grande école in France. It's like a technical university with elite status in Germany. And there I'm heading an industrial research chair. There's also a construction that is not so much known in Germany because in essence it means I have 4 industry partners that are funding the PhD students, and the advantage is that the PhD students can work with all the companies together. And in Germany you typically would have a one-to-one situation. You would have one company that is co-funding a PhD student. So quite a unique setting that I like quite a lot. And I have a third title slide. So when I put a photorealistic image of a professor for cybersecurity and lifelong learning for sustainable transformation into Dolly, this is what it generated. So it's not the image of the typical professor that we know. The good thing when you talk after all these bright minds is that, as so many good things were already said, you can really cherry pick what you're talking about, and I'm taking a little bit this freedom to do so. But I thought it makes a bit of sense to start a bit with context, where I'm coming from, because this is also a very good context for the discussion on sustainability. And I was looking at many, many different things in my life so far, and I consider this as an asset, because when we are in the sustainability discussion, we need skills from different angles, and therefore all this helps me. So earlier in my life, I was studying media science, I was studying computer graphics, then I was going to computer networks and distributed systems, and now I'm with cybersecurity. I'm with IMT Atlantique. I'm also with the German-French Academy for the Industry of the Future. I'm also the vice president of the German chapter of the Association of Computing Machinery, the biggest association of computer scientists in the world. And I was also involved with the Bavarian Institute for Digital Transformation. And why do I mention all these? Because these are all actors that can play and should play even more a role towards a more sustainable digital ecosystem. Yeah. When I was preparing for the talk, I was also thinking, okay, so what is my qualification to talk to sustainability? And indeed, I was running some interesting research projects that have to do with this. So already in 2014, we looked at a research project that was as for building as a service. And what we looked at there is, if you have a building, you're often, especially if it's a commercial use building, you have spaces that are used almost no time because they're meeting rooms that are not very frequented and so on. And it would be a great thing to share them among companies. But again, there we have the trust issue. So how can I use the room? How can I ensure that it's usable for me when I want to use it and so on? And here we looked at how can we use IT and OT technology, so operational technology and information technology, in order to enable such ecosystems in buildings. The second project here was on decentralized cross-commodity energy sharing. And this project was doing what you would expect. We also heard about it already from the Australian example. So this was about a blockchain-based market in neighborhoods for sharing energy. And the most interesting aspect about that was really the cross-commodity aspect. So we used heat and electricity to share this among the participants. And recently I work on cybersecurity, and in my talk I will also show why I consider this also as super important towards sustainability. The reason why I put these two projects is also to illustrate that in the research landscape, a lot of money goes into such projects, but often there's not too much that remains. Because these were transfer projects. This is why I liked your talk so much, because it was really, you put something in place and then afterwards they have the infrastructure. With us, we have a lot of good technology that we could use to have more sustainable ecosystems, but we are not using it. And as I will talk about education, my argument will be all of us should educate people more in the technology so that the technology that we already have is used more in order to achieve better sustainability. Often when you talk about sustainability, people think it's an antagonism between prosperity and sustainability. We know that this is not the case, and so already this is important to transport to people. Therefore, I also liked when we heard about, okay, it can be an asset for your company that you have sustainability goals because it helps you to recruit and so on. And so therefore, this is a first important point. In the next slides, I will focus on these two things. It's a little bit like Glücksrad. There are some letters missing, so you can think about if you can guess what the words are. So the first word is awareness, because the most important thing when you want to change something is making people aware that there's a need to change. And the good thing is we have a lot of tools from the IT side, from the OT side that would help us to make people more aware of what is happening. The best example, I think Achim talked about it already, is that you have these smartwatches that tell you like, okay, you did 1,000 steps, you have your fitness goal achieved. And it would be great if we would have something similar for sustainability. So if we would walk around and it would tell us like, okay, today your sustainability was lower than yesterday and you did this and that, and maybe you could do this and that in order to improve your sustainability tomorrow.
The second word. Yes.
We'll come to it. This is for that you stay attentive, then you can see it. So yesterday when I was creating this slide, I was looking, okay, it's interesting to me to see a little bit what is the energy usage of the technology that we have. And indeed, what we see here is that a ChatGPT request here is in the order of magnitude 3 to 4 more energy intensive. Why is this relevant? Because today there are even plugins for WhatsApp to help you to answer your WhatsApp messages faster. And of course, they're querying the ChatGPT behind. And I would expect that if you have this plugin installed, you're not using it all the time. So therefore, it sends requests that you don't even need. And therefore, such a perspective is important. Slash, it's always important where the energy comes from. So if it's solar-powered energy, it's not so problematic, taking into account the production of the solar cells and so on. It might be not as problematic as if you have a coal power plant, for instance, standing next to this. The problem is when you show this, it's again about awareness, it's very abstract. So it might tell us something because we might be used to these numbers here and to these units. But if you put something like even Google estimates the search requiring blah, 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 and that could power a 10-watt light bulb for 108 seconds, it's much more clear because a 10-watt light bulb for 108 seconds is something we can imagine. And so therefore we can relate better to the information that is presented. And this is important if we want to reach the people, that they have an emotion with it. And when I read, okay, it's 4 times more, I don't have an emotion. When I read like, okay, I could run my light for the entire night with whatever, with 100 Google searches, and maybe I'm doing 100 Google searches a day, then it's different. For me, it's a much closer emotional relationship. As I said, the thing with the variable, so we also had a research project that was about augmented reality, where you had glasses like the Microsoft headset, and with that one you can walk around. And our intention was to visualize things. And this is also a good example for how you could visualize sustainability. So if I would see, okay, if I do this now, it will use that much energy, or it will have these ethical implications and so on, I would have more awareness, and then I would be educated in order to decide. Because today it's often difficult to decide for the more sustainable solution just because we don't know what the more sustainable solution is. And we can especially not quantify it. We cannot say, okay, this would really have an impact now if I do something. Okay. Message, the tools, we have lots of tools for raising awareness, but we do not implement them yet. So Google does not tell us this search did take so much energy, or this ChatGPT request did take that much energy. And it would be easy to put it. And this is again where regulation would probably be the right tool. So if the European Union, for instance, would force the companies to do that, people would be more aware of it, and then they would potentially think twice if they launch a ChatGPT request that they don't need. Okay, so second word. The second word is empowerment. So when we're aware, then we should empower people to do something. I was a little bit summarizing my conclusion from the discussion. So we want to be more sustainable. So our mindset should be more towards we take care of the planet, we take care of the other people that are around us. So this is our goal. At the same time, we want to have higher living standards in terms of what our living is today in Europe, for instance. So we want to have growth. But at the moment, we have growth at the price of the environment or of other sustainability goals. And what I want to tell in my story here is that with the use of technology, so with especially IT and OT technology, we have the possibility to improve this part significantly, so the negative effects to reduce them in order to keep sufficient growth so that the planet is happy, that the people are happy, and at the same time we still have high living standards. So I just say it like that. Of course, there are more constraints, like you don't have eternal wealth, you have developing countries that you have to support. If everybody would use as much energy as we do, it would not work. But if we would use all technology that we can in order to reduce the negative impacts, this would already have a huge positive impact. Okay, so we want to have high living standards, and at the same time we want to have sustainability. And so now I will go up these points here that for me are in that order. So yeah, let's have a look at the different points. And this is again more to give you a little bit food of thought to think about, okay, yeah, this is like that. And now he put it maybe into a context where I didn't have it before. So operational technology, what is that? Basically, these are all the cyber physical systems. So this is where software meets physical reality. The key thing about that is the so-called maker culture here. So that means we live in a time where we can buy a 3D printer, we can land one, we can use one in a fab lab next to us, and we can practically produce almost anything we want in small quantities. So we can just create something if we're missing it, if we have the skills. Because remember, my talk is about education. So if you have the skills to do it, from the technological side, the possibilities are there and they're even accessible. In France, even better than in Germany, because there you have lots more fab labs that are accessible almost for free. But also in Germany, in every major city, you will find such places where you can do such creations. And this is really remarkable. So when you look at the beginning of the first 3D printers, the first 3D printer was something that you could print yourself. So you could download it, you could print it on an existing one, and then it could create itself. We also have robots that can print themselves. So it's a very interesting technological development that we do not at all see implemented today. So we only use a fraction of the potential that is behind this technology. The second, information technology. So when I was asked, okay, what is computer science? I was always telling it's like magic. It's like you create a spell. So you say some words, you put them into a computer program, you throw it on the machine. With these cyber physical execution platforms, you can put it even on a robot that is then doing something. You press run, and then something magic is happening. And this is cool because it means we can express what we want to have, and then the machine is executing it, and it's manifold expanding the powers that we had. And with the cyber physical systems, this is even happening in the physical space. Because I was doing a lot of research in Internet of Things, smart buildings, and so on. And even something like the holodeck is not necessarily fiction today. You can physically transform spaces, and you could say, okay, now I want to have a kitchen, now I want to have a living room. You might even know these things with the moving shelves. And so this is, to me, this is really magic. Attacks. The reason why I put it is mainly to show a cyber attack is something where one always thinks, oh yeah, someone else is affected, it's far away. And also the consequences are super fuzzy unless you're affected. So as you said, you lost all your data for the bike thing and so on. And so therefore, we have this thing, which is great. But my message here, which I will elaborate a little bit because it's my major research topic for the moment, the message here is without cybersecurity, it doesn't matter what we have here because we cannot deploy things in a responsible way if we don't have the cybersecurity. And therefore, for me, cybersecurity is really the basis on top of the enablers here in order to have something that is, again, sustainable in the sense that we can really put it and it can be usable by people in a responsible way. What is maybe the biggest achievement of computer science is we have a von Neumann architecture. That means we did the change from physical control. So when you are old enough, you still know these washing machines with these turning wheels that will have physically plugging different mechanical connections as a controller. Today, in almost all of these machines, you will find a software controller. And this is great because you have something in software, so you can change it. And this is also a super strong power towards more sustainability, because it means when we decide now we want to have more sustainability in products, and it's possible by changing the workflows of the products, we can do something called over-the-air update. It doesn't necessarily have to be over-the-air. It can also be a USB stick that we plug and so on. But it means we can retrofit different behavior into existing deployed machinery. And this is quite cool because this gives us even more power and effect of changes that we want to implement. It can have immediate impact even on rolled out infrastructures that we have here. Of course, this is highly problematic. I'm doing research at the moment, for instance, in how can you do over-the-air updates for trains. And there you have many issues, like you have opportunistic networks, you don't have security in the connection, you affect highly sensitive infrastructure, you have to really be sure what is happening there and so on. An important aspect that we were also hearing in the conference a lot is collaboration. I'm also convinced that collaborative systems are the systems that bring us forward, that give us solutions. When I was creating the slide, it was interesting because I was thinking, okay, we're talking a lot about trust and we're talking about distributed ledgers as enabler for trust. But I would actually say distributed ledgers and also fully homomorphic encryption are tools that are exactly not requiring trust, because they are enabling consensus between non-trusting parties. And this is quite interesting, because it doesn't invalidate anything that we discussed, but it adds even a new way of trust, because we can trust each other without trusting each other in the classical sense. So I can share something with Elizabeth and we can still be agreeing on that it's a reality, even though we never met and we don't have a trust in the classical sense. And so therefore this is quite cool that we can use the notion of trust without having the trust in the classical sense through the technology that we have here. And typically trust we have in a centralized way with a public key infrastructure and some other things. Machine learning we looked at the group already. So machine learning is also super interesting, because machine learning is also something we discussed this morning, is a little bit like the invention of the wheel, or not the invention, but the discovery of the wheel. It's like we have a super powerful tool, but we don't understand it yet fully, and therefore we cannot fully use it. And this is a little bit the situation at the moment. Keywords for thought here: explainability. I will have another slide on that in a second. Fake news, something super important, because humans are trapped by masses of information. With large language models, we can create such fake news. We can throw it into the market and then people will read it, or even algorithms will learn from it. Huge problem. Also huge problem that with the large language models that are out now, it's still nearly impossible to find out 100% sure if something is machine generated or not. That means everybody who doesn't have the snapshot before the GPT-3 was put out cannot be sure if some of the content they are using for learning is machine generated or not, which implies, of course, then problems afterwards, because you don't have trust into the data. You cannot trust that it was human generated data. Big advantage of machine learning for me here: big data was the last big hype. With machine learning, finally, we can make sense of this big data, because we can, in a fuzzy way, process lots of this information. We were talking about power and money that is behind this machine learning, because data is everything. Tesla has the biggest database of driving data, therefore they can develop the best algorithms, or not develop the best algorithms, but do the best training that create the best models. Interesting in that direction, EU Data Act, that is something from the EU that wants to work against this trend by saying, okay, in certain cases we will force the companies to publish their training data so that everybody can benefit from it. Has advantages and disadvantages, and is especially often made by policymakers that are not rooted in the technology domain. Also interesting about the machine learning is that we always said, okay, it will replace repetitive work and so on, and what it's replacing at the moment is rather art, for instance, as we've seen at the beginning, where it created some images about it. Interesting there also is that this seems to be a creative task, even though in the end the algorithm is just selecting from a large body of art and putting something together. And just as we don't know everything that is in this body of art, we don't recognize it as a replication, but we recognize it as something creative. Also very interesting. And this is also something we discussed before in our group. So from the creative side, it's at least able to replace shallow creative tasks. So I was talking with someone who does illustrations for cartoons, like cartoon shows on TV, and she was telling me the studios, they are not recruiting background drawers anymore, because the focus is on the foreground and therefore the background is auto-generated. And therefore, this is what I mean with a shallow task. And therefore here also like trust in the technology and the creativity. We were discussing in the morning a little bit, creativity could be the Turing test for artificial intelligence. Is it a as Christian said, an artisanal thing, so something that is really creative, then it's probably not created by artificial intelligence. So the explainability as promised. So 4 weeks ago, I guess I was meeting with Adi Shamir, the one from the RSA algorithm, and he had an interesting presentation which was about fitting. When you have a machine learning model, how does it actually do the fitting and what is a deep fake? This was at the Heidelberg Laureate Forum. If you never heard about that, look it up. It's a great event where all the Turing Award winners, among others, are participating. So this is why he was here. What you will see now is this is a training data set, and you have some blue things. This is one class, and you have some red things. This is another class. And when I will start the video, you will see that the curve will start fitting these points so that it can discriminate between the two groups. And the arrows are just the forces of the training data. So where are they pulling the curve? And so let's just do that. Okay, so now it fitted, and this is super interesting because it shows you that the manifold that was created goes closely around the training data set. And this is super interesting because it means that when you change the thing that should be recognized, so he was talking about, I think, dogs and guacamole, so two very different things. If you change the image just a little bit, it will be classified as the other class. And the explanation behind it is as follows. So if you say like, okay, this is the image, then you can create super similar images on this entire line. And that means if you create an image now that is in the lower part below the line, even though it looks then like a dog, it will be classified as a guacamole. And this is super fascinating because he was also showing images, and as a human, you cannot distinguish between the two. He was also showing how you can generate that. And this goes into the direction of this explainability. So the machine learning tool, the wheel that we have there, we don't understand it. We don't have an intuitive access to it. And therefore, we can be fooled. Things can happen that we do not expect. And I liked it, therefore I wanted to share it with you. Okay. Industry 5.0 is interesting because of the German-French Academy for the Industry of the Future. And what is Industry 5.0? Industry 5.0 is bringing the human in the loop. So the focus is not about improving the machinery or the efficiency or something like that. It's about bringing the human back in the process. It's human-centered. And to me, this is a tendency in research, which is quite nice. So it's more about humans. It's not only about optimizing processes, but it's about humans and technology. And this is very much in the sense of what we do here, discussing how can we use the technology not just for optimizing shareholder revenues, but for optimizing living for humans and conditions of humans. And the last example to cybersecurity, I just put because this is how I illustrate to my students why it's necessary to secure cyber-physical systems. So these guys mounted on this robot arm that you use for car production a chainsaw, and it will now saw out the table and some chairs. And you can easily imagine that when someone attacks this thing and you're close to it, it will be easily able to kill you. I mean, it would even be easily able to kill you without the chainsaw, but with the chainsaw, it's even more impressive. Okay, yeah, so this is now sawing, and then afterwards you have this thing. So, again, the tools for implementing sustainability add-ons, or many of the tools are there, only we don't use them so much yet, and the reason is that the implementation knowledge is broadly missing. So we, at our school, for instance, we don't have sustainability studies in the computer science curriculum, for instance. And it would be great if we would have it, and it would be super necessary, including ethics, including environmental protection, and so on. Because as engineers, we are the ones creating the technology that is then rolled out and used by multiple people, and therefore it would be in our responsibility, but therefore we would have to teach it. And this brings me to the education part. In the education part, I put this image to tell, okay, we have to inform the people. We have to tell them, okay, here's a good thing. We have technology, we can use it, and if you implement it and use it correctly, you will help us save the planet and humanity. Questions are there: whom to target, how to target them, when to target them. My answer is target as many people as possible. How to target them, I will come to that in a second. And when to target them, I will also come to that in a second. But the answers are: use as many ways as possible and target them from as early on as possible. So this should be something we have in our DNA from the beginning. It's also important, think about the indigenous abstraction image that I had there from a database, that we know taking care of the planet, taking care of other humans is a high value that we want to really follow. Yeah, so and again, for me, technology is a good enabler. So already 20 years ago, I was among the first ones introducing e-learning to scale teaching up and to also intensify the teaching. So this is also good. So we have tools where we can do something. More recently, we have MOOCs. So this is also a good tool to use. I could also discuss with you a lot if it's efficient to have it or not. You can do videos, you can do speaker series. So these are some activities that I'm doing. Especially this one is interesting to us because I was also interviewing lots of Turing Award winners about how does our society get transformed through algorithms, through the ubiquity of technology. And yeah, of course, you also have, as we already heard, newer forms where you have super short content, which is also highly valuable to produce something for. But, so the tools for education are there. Implementation knowledge is often missing. So as you see, it's always a little bit similar. And what do I mean by implementation knowledge? So the implementation knowledge, this is for us as people who could educate other people, is that we are also lacking professional training often in how can you efficiently teach people something. And therefore I wanted to bring you just one thing, which is the pyramid of Bloom. And so this is constructive alignment. So hopefully many of you heard of it already. Those of you who did not hear about it already yet, look it up. It's super helpful. The basic message is you have different kinds of knowledge that you want to transport. So here people are able to create something. So you say, okay, please build me an airplane, and they're able to do it. Here you have, okay, which are different types of airplanes that exist. And the important thing with constructive alignment is when you know what you want to reach in your audience, you can adapt the methods, how you train them. And this is important for being efficient in the teaching. Okay, target group. So as already said, so I would target everybody from as early on as possible. Also because of the indirect effects. So if somebody found it cool to learn something about sustainability, he will spread the message to others and so on, and therefore it gets more viral. This is good. And therefore, let us enable people to use what we as humanity have to provide more sustainability. So the message really is we're in a good position. We have, from the technology side, we have a lot of things, and therefore we should enable people to do something with it. I have 3 more slides. This just super shortly. Openness in the material, teaching material, standards, and so on, can be very helpful in order to adapt technology. So open standards, open hardware, open software, something very interesting. And yeah, so this then explains a bit the steps that I had in between. And then some of you might remember this person. So he was a high school, and one day he was bringing this clock he disassembled and showing it to the teacher. And the teacher was calling the police because it could have been a bomb. And then afterwards he was arrested. And why did I put that? Because as this is not part of the standard curriculum, but it might be cool that it is, at the beginning we might have obstacles when we teach such things. And we should not be discouraged by that, because he then afterwards, he was at NASA and so on. So the people really welcomed him. So it was advantages for him. It might not always be the case for all of us, but it's good to be also sustainable in our effort to educate people there. Okay, so IT/OT can do a lot, but so many skills can help increasing sustainability. And with that one, I wanted to say, like, this is not the holy grail, of course. I mean, this is what I know best. This is why I advocated for it. But there are so many skills and things that you can use in order to increase sustainability. And therefore, I will contribute mostly here. Others should contribute in their own ways. And therefore, let's teach them, let's use them, and let's make our planet great again. Thank you very much.
Ja, merci beaucoup, vielen Dank.
De rien.
Grazie mille to Marc-Oliver. So important. Education, the potential with a healthy balance. Education with all senses from early childhood on. So the kids get to explore, like Alexander von Humboldt, the nature. They know the plants, they know the beauty of a bird singing, and then and of course, social interaction. And then they grow. And the worst thing that can happen is that when they put their feet into a high school or university, if this stops, and we force them on chairs, and we force them on doing only projects that don't contribute to the challenges. I had a very nice experience in San Diego, a public school, K9, and D school, design thinking based school, 1,200 children. And I stepped into this room, and a class was sitting there with tablets. So I asked the principal, what are they doing there? Oh, he said, yesterday they have done pottery with their hands. Today they document to have that healthy balance. And merci beaucoup that you contribute so much to science and to the world of education with passion for the future of our children. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think it speaks for itself. Everybody answer, please.
Yeah, thanks so much for your presentation. In the beginning, you were talking about that we have to set like the right incentives. I think that also like aligns fairly well with basically the message from Ernst Ulrich and Weizsäcker. How can you do you think any for the education bits? How can you incentivize like academics or other people who want to create the knowledge to basically publish their knowledge? Because I feel like fairly often people are interested into entertainment and less interested into the education.
So my first answer would be, first you have to motivate the teachers, and there I see two ways. The first is top down, so that the ministry or the government is saying, okay, you have to put that in the curriculum right now. And the other one is bottom up. When you see passionate other teachers, you will probably increase your effort in that direction. And also when you see how rewarding it is because your students are liking what you do in that direction, it will also increase the effort. But this wasn't your core question. Your core question, how can I package it in a way that people find it interesting? So there I would say with TikTok or YouTube channels, we have many very good examples where people manage to package it in a way that it's super interesting to do something. So I have, for instance, on Facebook, I have the Action Lab. This is a guy who does lots of physics experiments, and so he does it in a super interesting way. And so even though normally I would maybe not even be interested in the answer of what he's showing me, it's like, oh yeah, cool, what is he doing now? Oh, he's putting something into his vacuum chamber. Okay, cool, what is happening now? And so therefore, I think we are lucky that today, through the internet, we have access to a global pool of creators of learning material, and we can get inspired, and we should also try out new things. So this is something I was always doing in my life. I was always trying out new ways to teach people, and especially when you have synchronous teaching, you will get immediate feedback. And you will see if it works or not, and if it works, it's a little bit self-reinforcing, and then it will work out.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, then thank you very much.
Wonderful.